and it's the Titterpigs, the RPG podcast. Am I getting paid for this one?
Liebt man im eiskalten Winter, ist nichts dahinter, auch nicht im März. Nur vom April bis zum Juni lässt mich in Ruhe das dumme Herz. Fast wird vor Kummer mein Haar weiß, alles geht bar.
All right, welcome back to another episode of Titterpigs. Today we have with us David Larkin in the studio. David is the line editor. David, correct me if I get any of this wrong, but he is the line editor and manager for Chaosium's Pendragon product line. He is graciously agreed to come hang out with Scott and I in the studio for, I think this is going to be episode 12. Oh, God help us, Scott. We're in double digits, my friend.
Wow. Yeah.
It's a milestone. We've hit a milestone. So, David, hey, welcome to Titterpigs. This is awesome, my friend. Thanks for being here with us.
Well, thanks so much for having me, and congrats on making double digits. I think the average lifespan of a podcast is like 4 or 5 episodes, so you guys are well past that. You're good.
You're
cruising.
We've reached our 7-year itch. We did get couples therapy, and we made it through, and we got our groove back. So yes, we're smooth sailing from here. But yes, thank you, David. I do appreciate you coming on. Likewise, and this is definitely looking forward to this for a while. I know Keith going to be taking the helm in the Pendragon discussion, but one of the other things that we'd like to discuss here is Berlin, which I've been spending quite a bit of time with, and I'll go into more detail of that later. But first, if you wouldn't mind, for those who are listening, for our what do we call our Titterpig people? Do we have a name for them yet?
Just followers, fans.
We're not going to do piglets or any silly things like that.
We're not calling them piglets or anything else.
We'll workshop that later. But anyways, for our listeners who may not be familiar with you or who haven't listened to you on other podcasts, if you can just inform them a little bit about who you are, a little bit of your background, and what your involvement is with Chaosium and Pendragon.
Yeah, sure. Well, as mentioned, I'm the line editor for the Pendragon RPG, which is sort of my primary gig right now. I've been working in the tabletop RPG writing, editing field for about 7 years now, actually, because it was July 2015 that I quit my job and went for it. So yeah, 7 years. And I've primarily worked for Chaosium. We have a few other projects that are sort of out there in the, waiting for their time to go on a Kickstarter or, what have you. But yeah, mostly I work for Chaosium, Call of Cthulhu, Pendragon, RuneQuest. I even worked on a 7th Sea book. So I'm sort of obviously trying to wear every hat I can at the company.
Right. And,
yeah, I don't know. That's my professional side. I've been gaming for about 30 years now. Just as a hobby, as a lifestyle, really.
Right.
So yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Mm-hmm. So I was listening to some other podcasts that you were on, and we tend to do the usual, where was your entry point into RPGs and whatnot, but yours is a little bit different than most. One that I've shared before, but just if you wouldn't mind just indulging me on that also.
Yeah, of course. So yeah, as I've talked about once or twice elsewhere, I got into gaming through the Lone Wolf gamebooks, which was sort of part of that whole thing in the 80s with these supercharged choose your own adventure books. Final Fantasy, I think, is the more famous example. What I really liked about the Lone Wolf books, though, was that they were, I didn't know at the time, I didn't have these words, but they essentially were an RPG campaign because you played a persistent character through the whole series. as you gathered items or, other experiences that might come back around in later books. It just created a real engaging experience. And plus the world that those books are set in was originally a D&D campaign world from the author's home game. So when I got into RPGs shortly thereafter, everything was very familiar to me already. I kind of knew the tropes, I knew the assumptions. It was just like kind of taking it to the next level. And so game books were a great introduction for me.
Right. Yeah, mine wouldn't necessarily be called a game book, but it did lead to the other ones like Lone Wolf. My introduction was a friend of mine in elementary school gave me a copy of his Return to Brookmere, the Endless Quest books from TSR by Rose Estes. Another fantastic entry point, and which led to other ones as the book fair came to town. So, which brought with it Lone Wolf, which brought with it Fighting Fantasy, How to Be an Interplanetary Spy, Middle-earth Quest, and a lot of those were jumping points for me to eventually go to my friend's house, whose father owned a copy of Dungeons and Dragons. Like, ooh, what is this? This seems to be made by those people who made Endless Quest. They must be branching out. So yeah, that's something I like to hear is the not the atypical entry into RPGs. When I hear someone go, "Oh no, game books were my entry point," I'm like, "Ah, someone else."
God, see, I missed all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, mine was Menser's Red Box in like 83, maybe early 84 as like a gift when I was like 8 years old or thereabouts. And that was my entry at fighting the Rust Monster, sitting on my bed as a kid, fighting the Rust Monster, getting my ass kicked every time I'd come up across the Rust Monster. I still have it out for that Rust Monster. Yep. Still to this day, 47 years old, I still have it out for the Rust Monster. Yeah.
Well, then you don't know the joy of rolling your dice with these game books and looking over your shoulder and going, maybe we'll just fudge this one rather than start all over.
No, I know that joy because the Rust Monster, that was a solo adventure in the Red Box set. I know that joy. So,
yeah, it was a thing. And, and it's funny too, because I would read those Lone Wolf books to a friend also, in addition to playing them myself. And so I was kind of GMing the books basically because I was letting the friend make the choices. And I just read it out loud. And then my first experience with D&D, coincidentally, was a different friend who had the Red Box and ran me through that solo tutorial session in the same way, where he was reading it out to me and letting me make the choices. So I also have my Rust Monster vendetta.
I am not alone in that. I feel better now.
Yeah.
Which coincidentally, the solo adventures that you get with Call of Cthulhu and, likewise, the newer RuneQuest starter set and whatnot is how I introduced my son to Call of Cthulhu. I would run him through the solo adventure. So it is, just because it's a solo adventure, don't think, for those listening that you do necessarily have to do it yourself. It is enjoyable, but it is a nice way to introduce in a duet term to familiarize yourself with the rules and people into the game without overcomplicating it until you can get some time with the nuts and bolts of the rules. So fantastic. Yeah. So thank you. I do appreciate that. It's, like the game book solidarity. Maybe there's another one out there somewhere besides you and I. So the search is on. I'm going to take the lead here, and I would like to talk to you a bit about your book, Call of Cthulhu Berlin, The Wicked City, which when did that come out? When did you? When was that published? And it was available to everyone.
That was 2019. Published in 2019.
Okay, a couple questions that I have in regards to this. So, can you give a little summary about what the book is? It is a setting book within Berlin, but it is more than that. I mean, and to me, it is a lot more than that, because I'll get into that later. But just a brief summary of what Berlin is in regards to the book itself and what it provides to Call of Cthulhu.
The working title of the project when I was writing it was Secrets of Berlin. For folks who are familiar with the sort of the 90s and early 2000s Call of Cthulhu canon, there were a lot of sort of secrets of books that came out.
New Orleans.
And and so that was kind of the idea, was to just do the same treatment for Berlin. So the first half is information on the city, its inhabitants, the climate of the 1920s, the Weimar Republic era in Germany, all that kind of stuff. And, a lot of adventure seeds, of course, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And then the back half of the book are 3 pretty meaty scenarios. They're not they're not one session scenarios for sure. And theoretically you can combine them into a campaign, which is some playtesting did that, other playtesting ran them as one shots, but they do sort of they talk to each other because there's resonances that go throughout the scenarios. So an NPC you meet in the first scenario might return in the third one, but they'll be sort of a weird mirror image of who you knew in the first scenario, that kind of thing. So anyway, that's the basic idea. Is it's kind of a scenario pack / setting guide.
Mm-hmm. There's a bit of I guess you could say lore to it that is discussed in regards to how you went about writing this book. And one of which is the research that went into, the book itself. I mean, the history involved within it. It is obviously well researched. A lot of time and care was involved in this. What was it, and how did you go about doing this? Because I'm going to spoil the show here. Is, if I'm not mistaken, out of everything that you've done to research this book, one of the things that was never done is at the time, or at least upon the completion of it, you had never been to Berlin yourself. Is that correct?
That is correct, and that is still the case.
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks to the pandemic.
Yeah.
I have yet to actually go to Berlin.
Mm-hmm.
And my interest in the setting actually goes all the way back to when I was first getting into gaming. And one of my earliest games was GURPS. And I had the GURPS horror source book, and there was just a little sidebar in it that said the Weimar Republic is an underutilized setting for horror. And so I spent the next 20 years waiting for somebody to write a source book on the Weimar Republic for horror. And I eventually realized that was going to have to be me. I've always had an interest in like sort of German history. I have a degree in history, so I think that came in handy when I was writing the book, just in terms of research and stuff. I've done freelance educational writing for like history textbooks and reference books and that kind of thing. So I was able to apply those skills, which allow you to sort of fill. The thing with Berlin in the 1920s is there's a lot that's changed in the last 100 years, let's just say, especially in that city. It's just had whole sections completely wiped out and rebuilt. So even if I had been to Berlin, I would know Berlin now, which has some similarities, obviously, but there in a way, my naivete kind of helped me because I wasn't putting any kind of projection on it. I was able to just approach it like I would if I was researching a medieval history,
Right.
Berlin of today is not the Berlin of 1920. I mean,
no.
Not. I mean, like you said, pieces of it, yes. The remnants of 1920s Berlin that survived, a world war. Then the Iron Curtain and everything else, and then the falling of it, and then all kinds of political upheaval between then and now. It's amazing what you can do with research, and then the research, and then compile it and codify it and put it in writing. Because like you, I mean, I never actually finished my degrees, but I was pursuing. Scott knows I was pursuing 2 master's degrees in 2 different history disciplines. Yeah. So I can appreciate well-researched material. Yes. Kudos to you for putting together some fantastic research there.
Well, thanks. It was a goal for me when I was setting out to write the book, was to just really, do as much as I could there, because I think we've all had that experience of getting a source book for a game that's set in the real world. And it's just kind of like, I could have found that's out on Wikipedia, I wanted to dig up some gems, and fortunately I was able to, and partly that is just because that era of Berlin has been extensively written about, and also in English, which is very helpful. I mean, I have some German, but which was okay for like kind of muddling through a few sources here and there, but primarily my sources were in English or translated, and so that was a tremendous help. I've worked on other projects where not as much material was available, and you feel that difference acutely.
I know that all too well.
I do feel that it is almost become an expectation of a lot of the Call of Cthulhu games, as far as the extensive amount of research that is involved in these books that are set in a tumultuous historical era. Most recently with Children of Fear, which I played through that campaign, and likewise reading Berlin. I'm running the Masks campaign and the other books. And it's one of the things that I've always said to other people is yes, you do get a wonderful adventure. You do get this, this storyline that's going to guide you through, whatever the machinations of, the creatures or the mythos or the aspects of, the Lovecraftian horrors that you're dealing with. But you're also getting a very researched, very well handled historical guide through these eras. I mean, you walk away not just having a good time, but you're also learning something that you never really learned before, unless this is your specialty. When I had finished Children of Fear, there was so much about that part of the world during that time that I didn't even know existed. I mean, I'm a child of American public school, so these things aren't really focused upon unless you specifically look for it in higher education. And discovering these things later in life is a joy, and it also makes it almost like you could have these adventures in these different time periods, even without the Call of Cthulhu aspect, and still have an amazing time existing, and most especially within the Berlin book. I am going to gush a bit here on this, so I hope you're prepared. But so that's one of the things that I'm finding, that as more and more of these source books and these adventures come out from Chaosium for Call of Cthulhu, I get excited because I have these expectations that I'm going to be learning on top of just enjoying the game and finding out something new about our historical past that more than likely wouldn't have been crept up if you and others like Lynn Hardy and whatnot aren't going through this extensive research to create this immersive experience within this time period, and not just saying you're in Berlin in 1928. It's a bit rambunctious, and here's a tentacle monster. Go have fun. So yeah, it's really appreciate that, but I also feel sometimes it's creating this higher and higher standard. This threshold keeps rising that if you're not allowed to just throw out something of just for shits and giggles, so to speak, because you'd be like, where's the 18 months meticulous research? That's what I'm here for. Okay, so back into the aspect of Berlin itself. So I've been spending some time with the book. I'm gonna gush a little bit on the book itself. And I was looking for a way to kind of summarize my feeling of it, and this may not do it justice, but one of the things that as I didn't complete the entire book. There's the last adventure that I get through, but compared to the other source books, and mind you, I'm not as familiar with the older ones. This is 7th edition primarily. It is wonderfully decadent in how it presents Berlin to the keeper and how the keeper can relay that to the players. The city is alive and just on the verge. It seems like it's constantly on the verge of just utter chaos and anarchy. But the decadent nature that everyone seems to just kind of share in here is kind of keeps it together until the things change further down the road, with the variety of lead-ins that cause it to collapse on itself. But it just creates this thriving world that is perfectly suited for all of the Lovecraftian horrors to just thrive and build and just exist within there. It makes it an easy setting, much like how New Orleans can be to a certain degree, to just kind of pop anything you want in there and just have it shine within the city. But similarly, even if nothing really happens in that aspect, this setting within Berlin can just be an absolute blast to play in on its own. to experience all of these things as you've detailed, all of these factions, all of these true to life things that you're just going, this actually was a thing. This wasn't just made up for the sake. And I know there within the book itself, there's liberties taken, because it's still, at the end of the day, it's a game. You don't want it to be a dry historical book. But for those of you who haven't picked up Berlin, and if you're kind of sitting on the edge, get it. It is just a joy to read. And just as I'm reading it, I'm, kind of going, this is naughty to a certain degree. And which you don't really see a lot of. Your keeper
juice is flowing. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. It was flowing. And you touch on this in other setting books and other adventures within Call of Cthulhu, but there's just, as you said, there's just something about this time period in Berlin that's just this perfect recipe for all of these things, to not just for what you've described in the 3 adventures here, but you can place so much in here. Like during the Masks campaign, I would love to just spend a dominant amount of time here in Berlin rather than just the short period before you got to move on to other aspects to go. But to just I could seriously spend a year running a Masks type campaign in Berlin and just have an absolute blast and just have the players be, excited to come back for more. So
that leads me to a question then. So is there anything on the future horizon for an add-on to Berlin? Any additional material you've got squirreled away in the pipeline somewhere that you want to, that you can mention? If there, obviously if there isn't anything, there isn't anything, but I'm curious.
There isn't.
Okay, fair. That's fair.
Because I did have to cut a lot.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, not. I cut some written material, but I also just in the outlining and the writing process, it was like, okay, I have to cut it here, because what was happening is even the stuff that I was, including was leading to other things that I had to include. You know what I mean? Like things that were coming up in my research. I'm like, oh, well, I have to include that.
Yeah.
So there were definitely things that I left out. I was toying with the idea of doing like some mini supplements through the Miskatonic repository. That may happen. It may turn into, just kind of another scenario collection. I'm really glad to hear, that you're saying like, oh yeah, I could run a year-long campaign. That was my intention, is I wanted to present a city book that was a campaign setting and not just, run these scenarios and then it's just going to take up space on your shelf kind of thing, and that was actually another thing. There's some random tables in there for generating details of the city. I'd love to come back to that and write even more random tables so you could sort of procedurally generate the city as you're going through it, like that would be super fun to do. So it's definitely, I'm not done with it as a setting. I'd love to return to it at some point. And yeah, even on my own sort of, bucket list, I suppose, would be to run some non-Cthulhu games set in 20s Berlin. Like I have the, one of the investigator organizations in there, the Pathfinders, which was this kind of scouting organization. They're in there almost like kind of as a joke. I've never heard about anybody who actually used them in their Berlin games, but they'd be great for like a sort of teenage mystery investigation game that wasn't maybe not horror, but like, just kind of like a gumshoe system game or something.
Take note of that. Challenge accepted.
Oh, my dream would be to get some players together and entirely focus on this motion picture company. Part of that group through this era of this creativity that's going on in Berlin at the time. And as they slowly unravel, as they see behind the veil of the city that this decadence that they're experiencing is not necessarily what they thought it was. And just, then at the end of the scenario, there's these lost footage that could be found in a future, modern Cthulhu game or something that would roll into, a Delta Green type game or something like, what is this from 1930s or 1928 Berlin and whatnot? I think big, but in reality, these things tend to never happen. But, one can dream.
Pathfinders, kids on bikes, that could work.
Yeah.
Yes, you could do a kids on bikes.
Totally
bikes
work.
adaptation.
I'm going to take that up as a challenge. I'm going to go back and reread this, just the setting information, because I'm going to take that up as a challenge for the kids on bikes. So listeners, hold me to that because I need something to do for this fall. So
it's great because they were co-ed too. So you can have boys and girls, you know, it's ripe for gaming potential.
See, and that's what I like in a source book. I like things like this. I love the scenarios because I've read the book once right when it first came out. But it's the source information, the setting, the source material. Yeah, these types of books that pay dividends for me. These are the things that become some of my better, more cherished books where I can take them off the shelf and pull that information and apply it to different systems, different games. But it's those things that are multiversatile for me that become the better books or the best books of my collection of stuff.
The adventures in the game, I feel are a little bit more daring as far as some of the other Call of Cthulhu adventures that are out there. I'm not disparaging any of the others, but one of the things that I liked about, especially the first adventure, the Devil Eats Flies, is Keith and I in the beginning of the podcast here. One of the things that we discussed was agency in horror. Player agency versus PC agency, character agency, whatever the case may be. And we have differences of opinion on how those things occur, but I do like how within The Devil Eats Flies, it touches upon that. Spoiler alert, so if you don't want to know about it, jump ahead or, maybe I'll put a timestamp on here. But within the game, there's a point where, the investigators, one of the investigators can lose control of their character. And not just lose control of their character, but they are working to stop them from proceeding within the adventure. I'm kind of jumping around here to leave the spoilers to a minimum. And some people, but what you do within there, though, is you don't necessarily take away their player agency, their investigator agency, yes, but the player's still in the game as they now get to play this role and make decisions on how they proceed in order to further the evil machinations of behind the veil, which I feel is a great way of providing that, because to me horror is about losing some of that agency. If you're in full capacity and you have full agency, you're not going to be afraid of something. Why? It's the fear of the unknown. I don't know what's going to happen. And some people like that. Some people are just like, if you take control of my character, I'm going to get up and lead this table. And others, such as myself, absolutely enjoy that, relish in that fact as a player and also a GM. And I really like the way how that handles that, how it's kind of takes the best of both sides without giving the power entirely to either one, but still allowing for that agency to be lost to a certain degree. So yeah, that's I really enjoyed that, and it carries through the other adventures to the point where, once again, this is not to say anything negative about it, but these are definitely adventures. And the Berlin book itself, if you're going to portray the city, this living city, to your player characters, you should have a discussion, because there's a lot of touchy subjects within this book. There's a lot, both personal, historical, religious, and so on and so forth. And it's very broad, and you can use as much as little as you want. So I'll stop. I'm known to prattle on and on and on with one breath. So I'll stop my gushing here and let you and Keith get a moment. Sorry.
All right. So that's a good point. Let's transition over to Pendragon. Okay. So this game is near and dear to my heart, just more so than Call of Cthulhu, and I love Call of Cthulhu. I was a latecomer to Call of Cthulhu, but I was kind of a latecomer to Pendragon. I got into Pendragon. It was 1994, 95 in 4th edition, when players could actually have magic, which was really weird. And during that phase of its history, and it was one of the first role-playing games I bought with my own money when I was active duty military. Outside of D&D, it was one of the first books that I bought when I got like a real paycheck as an adult. So I have a history with it. It's one of my hands down favorite games. I'm comfortable with the rules. I'm comfortable running it. I haven't run it in quite some time, but I could pick it up and still feel pretty comfortable with it. Probably fumble a little bit these days, but still feel pretty comfortable with it. I know as well as everybody else out there that's fans of Pendragon that there is a 6th edition coming. I mean, that's not earth-shattering news. It's been announced for quite some time. There was a quick start, a year-ish ago. There was a quick start released on, was it the Red Blade? There was a scenario released.
No, Red Blade was for 5th edition.
Right.
So the 6th edition quick start is the Adventure of the Great Hunt. Yeah. And we're actually going to have another sort of quick start scenario coming out at Gen Con this year. Because, just with the state of the global shipping web, we were hoping to have this starter set out by Gen Con. It's just not, logistically, it's just not going to happen. But what we can do is get a little quick start booklet printed up domestically in sufficient numbers to have with us at Gen Con. And that's actually going to have a preview of the first scenario from the starter set, along with the quick start rules.
So my sad panda face becomes happy panda face. So I will definitely, because I'll be at Gen Con this year, so that makes me happy.
Great. Yeah.
So for those, I know you've talked about Pendragon 6th edition on some other podcasts and some other interviews and stuff, but for Titterpigs listeners that may not be aware of Pendragon as a whole, or those that may be aware but may not know the differences, in a nutshell, what can you summarize what sets 6th edition apart from 5th edition or 5.2, or the earlier editions? Is there any one thing or things that really sets it apart?
So much like pretty much every other BRP game, Pendragon has not changed dramatically over the years. It originally came out in 84, and for much like with Call of Cthulhu, 1st edition is kind of the most different from all the other editions, and we're not even doing quite as much of a makeover as, like, say, 7th edition Call of Cthulhu had. But what sets it apart, was sort of the simplest way to put it, is that Greg Stafford, who considered the game his magnum opus of all of his game design work, referred to 6th edition as his ultimate edition. It's essentially the culmination of 35 years of his refinement of the game from a mechanical standpoint, and his increasing understanding of the Arthurian canon, medieval history. That's all like sort of baked into 6th edition now, so that it's it's the ultimate Pendragon experience. For folks who are just getting into the game, in the next year or two, it's the perfect time to do so, because this really is going to be, the version of Pendragon, I think.
As someone who I'm familiar with RuneQuest, and obviously I'm familiar with Call of Cthulhu, I understand that one of the things about Pendragon is the use of passions, which, if I'm not mistaken, is something that's new to the most recent version of RuneQuest, but is utilized similar within Pendragon, but there's other aspects involved in that. Can you touch on that a little bit?
Sure thing. And, a bit of trivia is, my understanding is that originally the passions mechanic was going to go into the 3rd edition of RuneQuest. And when that wasn't going to work for a variety of reasons, Greg was like, well, I guess I'll write this Arthurian game and put him in there instead.
So, well, that's good to know.
So the new edition of RuneQuest is kind of actually coming full circle on this promise, and they're definitely cousins. They have a lot in common mechanically, thematically. They're both mythic games. And, when you're talking about the in Berlin, the aspects of player agency, we'll just say, kind of a little light bulb went off for me as I was listening, because I was like, I think that was probably informed by my experience with Pendragon, because there's a similar thing there where the passion mechanic can drive you to do things that you're doing as a player. You're not being forced by the GM to do anything, but it's sort of like, the more passionate you are about something, the more likely you are to do something against your better judgment, or, something that's going to like really have a negative impact on you or your friends or your society that you live in, which is of course very Arthurian, right? That's the whole thing, is that the passions are there to drive Arthurian, story beats.
Fantastic. I mean, I like the passion system. I like the trait system. I like the passion system. I'm gushing now, right? Because I'm a fanboy. I mean, through and through. I mean, I am.
Yeah. Little confession here, David. As much as we wanted to bring you on here to talk, we honestly just brought you on here so we can fanboy all on you. So we'll apologize after the podcast is done.
Right.
But anyways, Keith, go on.
Fair enough.
So let's go back to the for those new players that may be finding Pendragon, later this year via the quick start from Gen Con or whenever the starter box set gets released or the core book gets released down the road.
Yeah.
So for those folks that are new to it or returning folks like myself, is the game itself, I mean, I have my own thoughts, but is the game itself geared towards fantasy fans or people that are into history? So that's one question, but secondarily to it, is it geared towards new gamers or like old gamers, like veteran? I don't want to say old gamers, but like veteran gamers, or is there a mix? Who is this game really for? Who is Pendragon for?
It is for folks who like fantasy. They enjoy the fantasy genre and perhaps like their fantasy a little bit more medieval grounded, a little bit more folkloric. It's not well, let's see. I was going to say it's not Tolkien-esque, but it actually kind of, it has resonances with Lord of the Rings, I think, but it's not like that kind of post-Tolkien fantasy, right? With wizards throwing fireballs around and magic items for all and that sort of thing. A magic sword in Pendragon is a very rare thing indeed, and even then, it's probably just going to give you a slight little boost. It's not going to be, like Excalibur is Excalibur and everything else pales in comparison, that right. Sort of thing. Mm-hmm. Right. So yeah, it is for fantasy, enthusiasts, veteran and newcomer alike. I'd like to think, I'm very excited that we're getting a starter set out and that it's the lead release for the new edition, which is a first, that we're able to do. Because obviously with Call of Cthulhu and RuneQuest, they led with the core books and then the starter set came later. Here we have that luxury of being able to do the starter set first. And it is very much geared towards anyone who's just kind of, interested in, they see the word Pendragon and they think, oh, cool, Round Table Knights, King Arthur. I like that. Let me see what's going on here. Pick it up. And, we all got our start with the Red Box D&D basic set. So it's a similar thing where it's, showing you what it's like to have a game set in this world. Why is that different from other forms of fantasy you might be more familiar with? And what makes it special? What makes it fun? What makes the characters unique? Because that's, of course, the thing. And people are like, well, everyone plays knights. Isn't that boring? And, the traits and passions ensure that it is not. Every single knight is different. One of our little taglines for 6th edition is what kind of knight will you be? Because that's one of the questions that is asked in the game and that is answered through the gameplay experience. So as far as picking it up mechanically, it is the basic role-playing system divided by 5. So instead of a D100, it's a D20. So folks who are used to D&D and have their nice artisanal D20 sets will be able to use those. And it's just the D20 and the D6s. Very simple, very easy mechanic, roll high without going over.
Okay.
That's it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I'm sure both of you can answer this. Is that how the previous versions work, utilizing D20, or were they percentile based like the other Chaosium games?
It's always been D20, and that was part of Greg's objective, was just to really streamline the BRP system as much as possible. He wrote another Arthurian game, Prince Valiant, that's even more streamlined. It was sort of like a proto indie game that just used coins as a resolution mechanic,
So, and I have that game, and one of our listeners actually submitted a question in advance. Okay. So I was refraining from asking, but since you brought up Prince Valiant, I'm going to ask. They were curious, which is, in your opinion, and I think I already know the answer.
Mm.
But in your opinion, if I get this right, in your opinion, which is the better game, Prince Valiant or Pendragon?
The better game.
I have. Keith has his opinion.
It's very objective.
Not to put you on the spot or anything.
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, yeah, it's apples and oranges, frankly. I mean, the fact that they're both Arthurian is the only thing they have in common. Apart from Prince Valiant being set in a sort of IP, whereas Pendragon, one of the great things with Pendragon and with the setting is that it is, and this is another credit to Greg, was that he synthesized the bulk of the Arthurian canon from Geoffrey of Monmouth all the way up through the Mists of Avalon. It's all together and it all makes sense. Le Morte d'Arthur is the central spine, the narrative spine, but then there's medieval romances, Victorian literature, 20th, T.H. White is in there. John Boorman's Excalibur is in there. He really brought all these different factors together for the overarching setting and narrative. But what I like about Prince Valiant is that it was specifically designed as almost like a party game. If you're hanging out with family at the holidays and none of them are gamers, you could still bust out Prince Valiant and have a good time. They don't need to know anything about RPGs. Just gather some quarters together and you're good to go.
Right.
Whereas Pendragon obviously is a more traditional, RPG experience. But the funny thing about Prince Valiant is it has campaign rules in it. It has experience rules in it. If you just like your game super light, you play Prince Valiant. Or we're actually hoping to bring out more games using that engine in the future.
See, that makes me happy too.
So you're saying that ridiculous collector's price I paid for it the several months ago, I should have waited, but
I tried to tell you.
I still love it nonetheless, and it was well. I
have both of my Prince Valiant books, so I think our listener will be happy with your answer. So I do have two other questions on Pendragon. One is Scott mentioned earlier about the Call of Cthulhu starter box set and the RuneQuest starter box set having a solo game in it that was good for learning the rules and teaching other people. And I know we talked about that with the early, the 80s game books and even Menser's Red box set, right? Because you and I both experienced that. Now, will Pendragon's starter box set have that as well, like the other Chaosium products?
Yes, and that was so most of the starter set is material that Greg had written in one form or another that I just sort of pulled together and assembled into a starter box. He had like a 20-page prospectus on a Pendragon starter, and that was about as far as that had gotten. So I just took the material and made it into the starter set. But the one thing it didn't have was a solo tutorial. So I had the pleasure of getting to write that, which, considering where I started in the hobby, being able to write a choose your own adventure solo scenario was for my favorite game. It was definitely a highlight.
That's fantastic
for me. And yeah. So, and it's the same idea, you have a sort of very simplified character sheet. And it sort of teaches you the mechanics as you go along and also introduces you to the setting, because basically you're a page at the estate of Sir Ector, which is Arthur's foster father, and this is when Arthur is still squire. So Arthur as a young man basically, and you go with them all to London, where of course there's a sword that's sitting in a stone.
And the rest is history.
So which leads me to a question about the starter set. So within RuneQuest, the starter set, and I believe the Call of Cthulhu 2, there is a central character. I'm going to talk about RuneQuest like Vasana. Vasana has appeared again and again, and in the quick starts and in other aspects of the game, and within the starter set, this page that you mentioned within that. Are they going to make other appearances canonically within other sources? And also the adventures within the starter set, are they necessary to play through in order to continue within what's going to become the core rules and everything? Or, are you necessarily are you missing out on certain things if you don't have these rules to ease you into it. Because some starter sets are like that. Some they kind of there's a wall there where it's like, hey, by the way, we're mentioning stuff from our quick starter set. You may want to go check that out to know what we're talking about. But others are just like, nope, starter set is standalone, core is totally separate, and enjoy them both for what they are.
So the first question, in terms of I guess iconic characters, we could call it, reoccurring characters. The page is left left intentionally vague, right? It's just you. Right. It's your cipher, character. So they do actually, there is an Easter egg in the first scenario where they show up kind of on the sideline. So if you've read the tutorial, you'll recognize that scene that's happening, but other than that, not really. We have 8 pre-gens in the starter set, but again, they are, intended as player characters. So take the pre-gen, make it your own kind of thing, right? Which leads to the other part of your question. And one of my sort of guiding principles as I've been working on 6th edition, because when Greg passed away in 2018, we had his first draft material. So that's where we started off from. So fortunately, he'd been able to complete the bulk of the core material writing, so he left us with a lot of stuff to work with. And it's just been a matter of sort of shaping that into like, well, how's that going to look as a commercial product, basically, like as it comes out. So one of my guiding lights there has been modularity. I really want, and this might come from my own history as like sort of an autodidactic gamer. Like I had to teach myself how to game, and it was very confusing. Like, what should I buy? Do I buy the wrong thing? Oh no.
I know that.
I want it to be as much as possible. Yeah. I want it to be as much as possible. Just for the person who's just getting into Pendragon, if they buy the starter set, they don't necessarily have to run out and get the core book right away. They can continue on with the starter set and maybe pick up the Game Master book that has a lot more, it's got a bestiary in it. It's got more information on the world, feasting and tournaments and all that kind of stuff. So they can just supplement and write their own adventures if they wanted to. And if they don't care about character creation or having some expanded rules from what's in the starter set, then they don't necessarily, like I say, have to run out and get the core book right away. The starter set is definitely kind of its own thing. It starts on the chronology. So chronologically in 6th edition, we're starting out with Arthur pulling the sword from the stone. We're going to go back and deal with some, the sort of earlier years, but that's going to be a later project, So right now we're starting out with Arthur drawing sword from the stone. That's the case with the starter set. That's the case with the core book. The core book assumes, like previous editions, that you're going to be making your own characters and that they're going to be knights in the county of Salisbury. You'll be serving, Count Robert. And that's geared more towards, groups who want to do like more of a free form campaign or run the Great Pendragon campaign, that kind of thing. Whereas the starter set, those are more like, that was taking some material Greg had written called the Sword Campaign, which is a little bit more, dealing with the iconic moments.
Okay.
Arthur's battles and the foundation of the Round Table Order, and these sort of famous moments from the stories, so that folks who don't know a whole lot about Arthurian literature, by the time they're done playing the Sword Campaign, they will.
Okay. So that sounds like something for someone who is primarily familiar, like, I've seen the Excalibur movie, and that's going to hit some of the beats they're familiar with and maybe ease them into it and teach them other aspects of it. So that's fantastic. That's kind of how starter sets should be. Some hit those beats, others, not so much. So,
I really didn't want it to be crippleware, where it's kind of like you have just enough to play these adventures. So really the rules that come in the starter set are essentially Pendragon basic. It's everything you need to play the game, but just sort of boiled down to its essentials. Another early release we're going to be pushing out ASAP after the starter set is a revised edition of the Grey Knight adventure, which is a classic Pendragon adventure. It was written by Larry DiTilio, who wrote Masks of Nyarlathotep as well. And one of the things I really love about it is that it really gives you everything you need to understand what is going on in the world. So let's say you start with the core book and you grab the Grey Knight, great, you can do that. Or let's say you started with the starter set. The Grey Knight is actually, so the starter set covers the years 510 to 514. Okay. The Grey Knight's set in 515. So you can do the starter set sword campaign and then pick up the Grey Knight and do the next year from there. And then, whatever you want from that point.
I'm loving it. I am absolutely loving it.
That's that marginal area. Yeah.
Oh!
I'm loving it too, because what that means is when Keith loves it, the potential for him running it for me and others, grows exponentially.
Yeah, that's exactly what it means.
So, and it also helps if I end up getting it for his birthday or Christmas, because there's that obligation that comes with that, much like I had to deal with his present. We won't touch on that. That's for another day, but yeah.
Single versus for another podcast.
Yeah, exactly.
One day, I'm right there with you. One day I'll run that.
Tingleverse? I'll play.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, no.
All right.
So go ahead, Keith. Sorry.
I was just gonna ask, to kind of wrap up the product line. So you mentioned the Grey Knight, the starter kit, the core book, the Game Master book, the Great Pendragon campaign. Most of these things I have heard, either seen in print or in articles or heard on other podcasts being mentioned. Are there any other things? Like the Grey Knight is new to me. I hadn't heard that before. Are there any other things that are in the queue for the Pendragon product line? Now, obviously, I know things still need to go through the wickets and publication, the shipping woes of the world and all of that stuff. I mean, none of this stuff is imminent. Things are going to take time and whatnot.
Right.
The 5-year plan here. What are we looking at? Before you answer, I know like RuneQuest has its RuneQuest core book, and then it has the Game Masters pack, and it has its set of 3 core products, and then it has scenario book, scenario books and things. Are you guys gonna do like the Game Masters pack, like with the Game Masters shield and scenarios and tables and all of the doodads and stuff like they did for RuneQuest?
Yeah, and in fact, the working title for that is the campaign starter kit, right? So this is it's got the GM screen, of course, but it also has the Book of Salisbury, which is essentially a sandbox setting for the County of Salisbury. So again, you could pick up the core book and the campaign starter kit, and you would be able to basically start running a campaign of Pendragon with lots of NPCs and weird locations they can go to and all kinds of other stuff without even picking up the GM's book or the Noble's book, which is your sort of estate management level Pendragon.
Can I use my old? Somebody else had asked me, is the new 6th edition backwards compatible? Scott may have even asked me this.
I did. Yeah. I asked you
is
that.
It backwards compatible? So I took some older products that I had, like the Book of Battle 2nd edition, the Book of Feasts, and some of these other things, collated them, and I had them self-printed into a hardcover book for me to use at the table, because I'm anal retentive like that.
I get it. No, I totally get it.
Are those things still going to be useful to me, or are they just relics now?
Some are, some aren't, obviously with the new edition. So like the Book of Battle, I mean, you could use the Book of Battle. The mechanics are refined, but like I said, they're not radically changed. Cool. And in terms of converting, we're going to have a little conversion guide in the back of the core book for just, how to update your existing characters. And then, it's very simple. You can do it on the fly. You can do those updates on the fly. And so, yeah, I mean, there's nothing stopping you from using Book of Battle if you really like that super granular, crunchy system, right? But the 6th edition has a brand new battle system that's much more sort of narratively focused, runs a lot faster, because my personal experience was my player group tended to groan whenever there's the battle, because these tended to be like 2-hour plus affairs, so that by the end you really felt like you'd fought in a battle. So, it's stuff like that, right? Where it's like the feast, like obviously we're integrating the feast system into the core material now. But like the starter set's going to come with, a few dozen feast cards as opposed to hundreds of feast cards. So if you have your old feast deck, you can use that, we definitely want to have some level of compatibility between the two as much as possible, and especially when it comes to scenarios, that's very much backwards compatible.
Fantastic. That's good news. Cause like I have a number of the old original Chaosium books, like Pagan Shores and Knights Adventurous and things like that. So, and there's some of those scenarios are meh, but some of them are actually quite good. So, knowing that they're still compatible is good news.
Yeah, for sure. And as far as the 5-year plan, I mean, it's probably going to go out past 5 years. At this point, we have so much stuff ready to go. And that's another reason why we've sort of been, waiting a little bit on getting things rolling, because we want there to be a steady cycle of release. And at this point, we're now at that point, right, where we've got multiple books going through final edits, art commissions. They're going to be going to layout a little later this year, so that as the starter set lands, the core books come out, we'll be able to just keep it going, right? So like the campaign starter kit's going to come out, the Grey Knight. We're going to have a new Knights and Book of Knights and Ladies is what it was called. So the working title now is Knights and Ladies Adventurous, and that's going to be your expanded character creation options and all that kind of stuff. We are going to have a magic book that will allow for magician characters, but in a way that's quite different from how it was in 4th edition. That fits much more, easily into the Pendragon experience, I would say. Obviously then the new edition of the Great Pendragon campaign as well, which will eventually be a 6-volume set that goes from the time of King Vortigern all the way up to Battle of Scanlan. So
Last I heard it was going to be 3 volumes.
You can run 3 volumes initially, but we're going to go back and do the prequels as well. So we're going to Star Wars it up.
Oh my god!
And so eventually you'll have 130 years of material.
Can you guys just take my credit card now?
Oh, Chaosium already has mine, so it's good.
Well,
it's
they have
good
mine too.
It's good to know that the Pendragon line is following what I call this Chaosium golden era. It just seems like every other week. Hey, guess what? Here's more stuff that you're going to love and enjoy. So I'm just like, you know what? Just here's a direct deposit. Here's my checking account number. Just take out what you need, mail it to me whenever it's ready. So it sounds like the Pendragon line is going to be the exact same way. Just don't release them all at the same time, because at that point, it's just my kids want to go to college someday.
Mine graduates next year. Yes.
Oh, well, then lucky you. Fine.
Perfect timing. There you go.
So
yeah. No, that's fantastic. I love it. I am going to, I think over the next couple of years, I'm going to be totally fanboying the whole Pendragon experience again. Reliving my my early 20s, my late teens and early 20s again.
Yeah.
See,
I'm going to love it.
This is why midlife crises work well with role-playing games, because granted, as much as we're going to be spending, it's a lot less expensive than you reliving your 20s with a Maserati and a new 30-year-old younger wife.
Or Ducati bikes. Yeah.
So, but
starting your own band.
That too.
I mean that's obviously I really want to see Pendragon sort of come back, I guess you could say. I mean, it never went away, but it definitely went to a point where it was sort of an aficionado's game, and it was like, oh, you've got to play Pendragon, ooh, what's that? I want people to know what it is, like they do with Call of Cthulhu or RuneQuest, oh yeah, Pendragon, sure, like it or love it or don't like it or whatever. I want you to have at least heard of it and thought about, whether you wanted to play it.
Right, but there's, I mean, as somebody who played it in the 90s, where it wasn't quite an aficionado's game in 1994, 95, but has definitely seen it become an aficionado's kind of game. And I totally agree with that. There's no reason it can't be. I would love to say I could see it being, parallel to D&D. I mean, because it is a beautiful game, has always been a beautiful game. It tells fantastic stories. It's never been a mechanically crunchy game. It's far easier mechanically than D&D to understand. It tells wonderful stories that most people have experienced, hearing of some sort, Arthurian tales of one ilk or another. So things connect with most people.
Yeah.
People can connect to it relatively easily. it's for whatever reason, it's always been a little, I don't want to call it hoity-toity or aloof, but it always has seemed to be a little over here where D&D just kind of like barreled through over this way, and it got left on to the wayside, unfortunately.
As someone who is not as savvy with Pendragon, and from a consumer point of view, I'll kind of give what the general opinion was from me and other people, and it includes what you mentioned there, Keith. But for Pendragon, there's two things people understood about it. There's the Pendragon game, and then there's a Great Pendragon campaign. So in those iterations, it was like, here's this wonderful game. Do you have 3 years available to sit down and enjoy this? And then people kind of went, whoa. Yeah. But now it seems like there's going to be in this, this new resurgence and this magnum opus, as you said, the accessibility is going to be more open because you don't feel this pressure of like, in order for you to enjoy Pendragon, you have to run this all great, but this very, this extended campaign that's going to take up all of your time. And people are going to go, no, thank you. Whereas now it's just like, oh, well, you mean I can enjoy Pendragon just on its own? Absolutely. So I think that's what's going to draw more people in.
Thank you for mentioning that, actually, because that ties in with the modularity thing. So like the reason why the new Great Pendragon campaign is going to be in volumes is because, the average campaign lasts for like 10 to 20 sessions, they say, right? That's the thing. And for whatever reason, over the last 10 plus years since the GPC came out, it did become this thing where it's like you have to run the Great Pendragon campaign. And so time and again, I see people starting out, which it starts out 30 years before Arthur draws the sword from the stone. So people were playing King Uther Pendragon. They weren't playing King Arthur Pendragon, right? Because they would start in the Uther era and then it would peter out sometime in the Anarchy before the sword gets drawn. So I really want people playing wherever they want in the timeline. So as much as 130 years, I mean, God bless you if you want to do that whole thing, but like really what I'm intending is that you can grab volume 5 of the Great Pendragon campaign because you really like the romance and tournament periods. That's like high Arthurian chivalry. And that every volume covers about 20 years. If you're running one game session per year, or one adventure per year, then that's your campaign. Great. I love it. We want to come back to it later, pick up another volume and do that.
I love that.
And then eventually, if you want to do the whole thing, do the whole thing. But in fact, I want people to be playing shorter campaigns of Pendragon because there's a great dynastic element to the game, but it is not the be all and end all of the experience.
Thank you as somebody who is a Pendragon fanboy. Thank you for recognizing that there is more to it than just committing 3 years of your life to just playing that game, or more if you add the entire Uther period to it. Right. Because I've tried to run the GPC a number of times, and you're right, it just peters out. Even forget the Uther period, just starting with GPC, it peters out because people realize, crap, no, you're not joking. This is going to take 3 years, and then they're just like, meh. Yeah. Most big campaigns do that. It's a big commitment. Though, so it's not the fact that it's GPC; it's just any big campaign.
Yeah.
No. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it happens with Master Narth. That happens with
that happened twice.
Yeah,
mine's going to end early because they went from New York to Shanghai. Yeah, the
players are awesome.
Yeah, I know they are, but mine might end a little bit early because they decided to go that route, and I'm doing my best. But yeah, they are.
They went
hard mode, and I wasn't prepared for that. But anyways. Yeah. So, Keith, do you have anything else you'd like to add? We've taken up a good hour of David's time here. I just want to see if there's any other questions you have. And
no, you have answered my fanboy questions on Pendragon, so thank you.
So before we conclude, there's just a couple questions I'd just like to ask. These are more personal preferences, really short and sweet. Just one is, which one of the 3 scenarios from Berlin is your favorite? The second is, what is your favorite period within Pendragon that you yourself enjoy either running or playing in? And third, why is George A. Romero's Knight Riders the best interpretation of the King Arthurian legends?
Hey, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. I tell people to watch that movie because I'm like, I'll answer that one first because it's such a great demonstration of the traits and passions system. It's all about these guys who are just completely obsessed and just absolutely wrecking their lives in pursuit of this weird ideal. And then the other people were like, what, are you crazy? Like, even in their own organization. So plus it's just a lot of fun. It's guys on dirt bikes jousting with each other. You can't beat that.
That went off better than I expected. So thank you.
Bravo.
Okay, so and I'll just go backwards. So my favorite era to run Pendragon in, if I had to choose, the reason I think I said the romance and tournament eras is I think I do sort of default to that. I mean, fourth edition, the default starting year was 530, which is the start of the romance period, and that was my, I started with fourth edition as well. So, but it really is. It's the era of the high chivalry, high romance, the knights errant going out on quests. It's like tournaments rather than battles. So it's like, if you want that kind of like very high Arthurian experience, plus, you can see the rot starting to set in, Sir Mordred's about doing his Sir Mordred-y things, and, so there's that sort of drama playing out in the background as well. And there's other periods, like if you want the more kind of like knight military experience of going off to battle or whatever, then, there's other periods for that. And then of course there's the Grail and Twilight if you just want to get really depressed, so yeah, no, I think the romance period is, for me, that's my happy place. And for the, favorite of the three scenarios, I guess what I'll say is, like, I have had situations where someone, I was asked to run one scenario from the book for a group, and usually I go with the second one, Dances of Vice, Horror, and Ecstasy, because it's kind of a very self-contained story that has a big epic crescendo, and it's the most over the top of the three, so it's kind of the most fun to run. Each of the three scenarios obviously has their own flavor, and I actually just a few months ago ran the third one as a one-off and had a lot of fun with that too. But yeah, if I was going to choose, I'd say
excellent. I mean, it's hard choosing which one's your favorite child, but
exactly.
It just depends on the day. Like, Noah, you're my favorite currently.
That's because his sister's not around.
No, she was sassing earlier, but such is the way of a preteen. But no, fantastic, David. Thank you so much. This has been a wonderful conversation, and as mentioned earlier, I do appreciate you falling for our ruse of just coming here and just being all bunch of fanboys with you. And I hope it wasn't too much coming from us. Are you going to be at Gen Con this year with Chaosium?
Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to make it this year, but I'm definitely planning on being there next year, when we'll have a lot of cool Pendragon material out on the tables.
Excellent.
So
excellent.
Yeah, we're gonna have to try to find a way to make it to Gen Con again next year.
We shall see. It was a lot to get my wife to go this year, but maybe I might go solo next year. We shall see. Hey. But you'll be there in spirit as Keith and I will be there this year as we head by the Chaosium booth and pick up the new quick start for Pendragon.
So if you could ask Mike, I don't know if Mike Mason's going to be there, or Paul Fricker, or any of those guys this year, but if you could ask him to put those couple of quick starts aside for Scott and I, and
I'll pass that along.
We'll be there to collect them up.
And if we can have ours and just tell Pookie no, just for a laugh, that would be fun too, just to see the look on his face. But hi, Pookie. No, we're kidding. We love Pookie. He's going to be going with us too.
We're cool. It's an inside joke because he's not. According to Gen Con, he's not press.
Yeah.
So,
A mistake, I think.
Okay.
A mistake, I think.
I think it's a big, huge mistake on Gen Con's part. Apparently, they declined him a press pass.
Also, I don't think he's pushing too hard because that's not the British way, so to speak. He doesn't want to be a bother, and but it might get rectified once we're there. So
I hope so.
We'll see. Yeah,
because he's far more pressed than Scott and I. So
yeah, I mean Titterpigs. I'll be wearing a Titterpig shirt and pretending that I am pressed. Sorry, not pretending. I just want to make sure so they don't pull it. But yeah, a lot more. He's a lot more pressed than we are. Yeah. So, David, anything else you'd like to add before we wrap up here?
I guess I would just say with that quick start, you will see a preview, which Keith has also been party to behind the scenes of the sort of final version of the layout that we landed on, because I know that was a topic that came up. So we were workshopping it as we went through, and I'm very happy with how it looks now. And
it's gorgeous.
I think this is the best looking version of Pendragon that, by, several miles. And that's all down to, just Chaosium's support of like wanting to put out the best possible version of the game. So I'm really excited for folks to see that.
Excellent. Well, once again, thank you so much for taking time out of your Friday to speak with us and talk about Pendragon, and likewise Berlin. For those of you who are interested in what we spoke about, head over to Chaosium's website. Head over to your local game store if they have it. Pick up a copy of Berlin. Obviously
you won't regret it.
Yeah, you won't regret it at all. Keep your eyes open for Pendragon. Pendragon news on chaosium.com, and also subscribe to their YouTube channel. You were just, there was just a little interview with you today in regards to, adventurous gaming, and I forget what the term was. Not lawful good, but there's something else that was highlighted there. So check it out. And
playing heroic characters.
Yes. Yeah. Yep, that was it.
So thank you. Obviously, David, doors always open. We'd love to have you back on again. This has been a wonderful conversation, and as we get closer to Pendragon coming out, would love to have you back on and talk more. And obviously, if I can get Berlin to the table, would like to also let you know how things went with that, and to talk about other things coming out. So thank you so much.
Sure thing.
And we appreciate it. Keith, anything else?
No, I just like to reiterate what Scott said. Thank you for spending your Friday evening with us, and I'm gonna go fondle my Pendragon stuff that I got over here as I wait for the new edition to come out, because I am super stoked to play it, and I just want to get my hands on that new quick start. I guess it's what it is, right? The quick start at Gen Con. I can't wait because I want to run it.
And I think I will close whenever you say the word fondle. Never pause.
That's cool. We're gonna lose a few more followers. It's all good. We're used to this.
Our stomachs collectively drop.
Yeah, it's all good.
So, all right, everyone.
It's all good.
Well, thanks for having me.
We appreciate it.
It's been really fun.
All right.
Anytime.
I'm Arthur, King of the Britons. Whose castle is that?
King of the Who?